Welcome to Samvad at Mayank. Today we are discussing Bangladesh and we have with us Dr. Anshuman Behera. Dr. Anshuman Behera is an associate professor in conflict resolutions and peace research program at National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bengaluru. He's a trained political scientist. His main area of research interests are in the field of political violence and internal conflicts in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Democracy and governance in India, political theory, and the social impacts of development interest him. His books are Reasoning Indian Politics, Philosopher Politician to Politician Seeking Philosophy, Gandhi in the 21st Century, Ideas and Relevance, and Varying Dimensions of India's National Security, Emerging Perspectives, Negotiating Development at the Margins, Natural Resources, Conflicts and People's Movement in Odisha, and finally, the Maoist Insurgency, State and People, Overlooked Issues and Unaddressed Grievances. Welcome to Samvad, Anshumanji. It's an honor hosting you.
Thank you very much, Mayankji. Thanks for the opportunity.
So since we're discussing Bangladesh, what I've been observing, of course, you have been observing it much more minutely, is that recently after August 2024 and the ascendance of Muhammad Yunus as the chief advisor, whatever that means, I've not been able to decipher what that means, but it means something. So the Awami League is now a party non grata, and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which was very enthusiastic about the whole so-called revolution, which we see as a very soft coup, is on the run. The Bangladeshi Nationalist Party is not only on the run, it is now crying foul that it is not being allowed political space. The government is going after the Awami League with the Operation Devil Hunt. And whereas on the other hand, what we see is that rapidly Islamist organizations like Jamaat-e-Islami, Hifazat-e-Islam, which says that Bangladesh will be Afghanistan and we will be Taliban. That is the war cry it has. Now it's gaining ascendance. And then we have the Tahrir, I correct myself. Hizbut Tahrir. Now it is a banned organization, but it is still taking out positions in Bangladesh. Now they are making their presence felt very strongly. So do you see that Bangladeshi politics is now moving very strongly towards Islamization?
Yeah, thank you, Mayankji, for the question. And one has to understand the importance, the role, and the kind of position of Islamic parties. When I'm saying Islamist parties, let's not confuse with the Muslim parties. Okay, Islamist means radical, fundamental kind of political groups in Bangladesh. These groups are not new in Bangladesh. Okay, you remember, okay, there is a famous kind of saying after Bangladesh got its kind of independence from Pakistan. For all logical purpose, it should have joined India, right? There was absolutely no reason to remain as a kind of an independent state. Okay, if democracy, secularism, socialism, nationalism, these were the kind of slogans. But then, the constituency, the Islamist constituency have been very, very powerful in Bangladesh. It goes back to 100 years old. Say, we remember 1905, the partition of Bengal. The partition of Bengal was necessarily on the religious line. And the religious line here is not, let's make no confusion that the religious line was simply a kind of a spiritual, religious kind of thing. The religious line was fundamentalist kind of, the constituency is being empowered and emboldened, and they demanded a different kind of position, different kind of an administrative arrangement during the British era. Coming to the so-called revolution in July 2024, after that, BNP was in a fool's paradise. Okay, BNP, for all practical purpose was used to legitimize the Islamist, and the BNP could not actually understand, or they had no popular support, or whatever the popular support they had, that was actually hijacked by the Islamist parties, like the Islamic Chhatra Shibir, the student radical wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami. And it was given a spin, it was given a kind of touch that it was a students' movement. So the three important groups that you mentioned, they remain, of all these three, the Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh remains the fountainhead of all sorts of Islamist kind of, propaganda, or some sort of Islamist project, if I can say so. Okay. Hifazat-e-Islami thing, okay, this reminds me of a very, very seminal work by Hiranmay Kalekarji, okay, one who, in many ways introduced me to Bangladesh, okay, understanding Bangladesh. His book, Bangladesh, the Next Afghanistan, this was published 15 years back, okay. And he sounds very prophetic, in his book that, okay, what Hifazat-e-Islami actually, talks about or demands or has a kind of a desire. Also, we need to understand, the radical elements, the fundamentalist Islamist elements in Bangladesh. They became strengthened, only after, in a very, very manifest way. Once the USSR actually withdrew from Afghanistan, and the Mujahidins who went to actually, fight in Afghanistan, they came back. That was the time the Huji Bangladesh was formed, and they started their kind of activities. So then, and now you have three wonderful kind of, constituencies, Islamist constituencies, and who sort of, try to or have a dream, and they have a project to Islamize the entire political space of Bangladesh. Okay, three distinct but very, very clear-cut roles where Jamaat-e-Islami will have the kind of, role of actually having a larger social base, legitimizing fundamental Islam among the illiterate poor Muslims in Bangladesh. The Hifazat-e-Islami is a very, very specific Bangladesh kind of, Bangladesh-oriented Islamist group. They will try to capture the political, social, and religious institutions and say that they're the custodians of Islam. And Hizb-ut-Tahrir is a interesting kind of, animal here, okay, that has presence in more than 100 odd countries, and to be very specific, 153 countries they have presence. And these are English-educated radical groups. Okay, Hizb-ut-Tahrir has been working in Bangladesh, Pakistan. They tried in kind of in India, but some of them were captured from Madhya Pradesh, and that was the end of Hizb-ut-Tahrir. But one cannot say. But let's come to Bangladesh. Hizb-ut-Tahrir has a strong role, kind of, one, radicalizing the educated youth. Okay, and legitimizing Islamic radicalization. Okay, so now that we have three kind of, groups, and the civil society organization, pro-democratic civil society organizations are on run, and they are silent on certain things. Okay, and I see, and the BNP has been completely sidelined. They do not have any kind of, support base right now, or a very little support base. We are necessarily heading towards an Islamization of Bangladesh politics. Yeah.
You spoke of the fundamentals of the Bangladeshi constitution in your answer, which was nationalism, socialism, democracy, and secularism, the 1972 constitution. But there has been this high-powered committee which has suggested the removal of other words, and only democracy is supposed to be retained with other changes. So, but democracy as we see it is basically I mean, it is non-existent as on the ground of what we see, because the Awami League is being hunted, the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party is completely sidelined, the minorities, particularly the Hindus, are being targeted. So, do you see that democracy in Bangladesh, despite the high-sounding words of what Muhammad Yunus might be saying, is on a backslide?
Muhammad Yunus has been, okay, I say this very, very responsibly. He has been a disgrace to all sort of kind of, kind of expectations, democratic expectations, the so-called Nobel Prize winner and all that. Okay, let's not get into. But what is interesting here is, if you see the history of democracy in Bangladesh, it has always been limited. Democracy in Bangladesh is just an extension of democracy in Pakistan. The Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, when he came and he sort of, formed, or the Bangladesh got its liberation, freedom, these four terminologies or the four concepts that you mentioned, okay, they were not practiced in letter and spirit, okay, and there was a lot of flaw and a lot of kind of responsibility Sheikh Mujib Rahman and Awami League have to take to sort of why democracy is in a situation that it is right now. If you see the four kind of concepts, nationalism was actually a confused kind of concept in Bangladesh, whether they will be Bengalis or Bangladeshis. Okay, that is the so-called the so-called kind of protectors of Bangladeshi identity, and that is where they pushed the Islamist agenda. They actually departed from saying themselves as Bengalis. Okay, because they said if we are Bengalis, then why did we sort of split from the United Bengal in 1905? Right. Okay. The Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, when he was in the helm of the affairs, he didn't invest much in kind of creating a nationalist sentiment that revolves around the cultural, spiritual, or regional kind of components of Bengali nationalism. Okay, that is a failure. Okay. Coming to socialism, if you see successive governments in Bangladesh, they fail to actually explain what is socialism. Okay, whether the state will have the ownership over the modes of production and means of production, going by the the socialist kind of tradition. There was absolutely no kind of clarity on what socialism was. Okay, so the only thing that remained constant with all the political kind of successive governments was the socialism, was the centralization of corruption. Okay, this is very interesting in Bangladesh. Okay, to that extent, and all the kind of governments were socialist because they centralized corruption. Coming to democracy, see, in India, we have our flaws on democracy, but then we have very strong institutional framework. This party or that party, whichever comes to power, they will have little kind of a role in changing the institutions. The institutions have been very, very robust. Other South Asian countries, including Bangladesh, have failed to institutionalize their democracy. Right, and democracy has become a romanticized word to kind of buy legitimacy of the political regimes. Muhammad Irsad to Ziaur Rahman to Mujibur Rahman, then Khalida Zia, then Sheikh Hasina, they used democracy as a terminology to legitimize their regime. Coming to secularism, secularism was never practiced in independent Bangladesh. I tell this with responsibility. Because if it was practiced, even the so-called kind of democratic parties like Awami League, okay, had difficulty in saving the Hindus and the other religious minorities in Bangladesh. So if I put this thing in a perspective, okay, now when the Constitutional Reform Commission, this is a very, very strange way of actually doing things. It was constituted in 11th September in 2024. And a professor who I respect a lot, Professor Ali Riaz, was actually given the responsibility of heading that particular commission. And he comes up with, and he submitted his kind of a report on January 15th, 2025. Very, very self-contradictory, self-confusing kind of recommendations given. Says that the people of Bangladesh will be called as Bengalis. Okay, I'm giving just you an example that the people of Bangladesh will be called Bengalis. Okay, that is one sort of cultural nationalism. But the citizens of Bangladesh will be called as Bangladeshis. Okay, creating kind of distance between cultural and political life. Okay. The least he forgot is that there is absolutely no difference, or that should not be any difference between cultural and the political identity of a person or a kind of this thing. But then if you see, very interestingly, when Ziaur Rahman was in power, when Muhammad Irsad was in power, they never tried to tamper with the constitution. The only thing they tried to do is to keep the Islamist constituencies happy, or to appease them. Say, for example, Muhammad Ersad actually inscribed, some religious verses in the constitution in Arabic. Okay, that also sort of satisfied some of the radical elements. Similarly, Ziaur Rahman would give some kind of tokenism to the madrasas, or he knew how to actually handle with the Jamaat Islami fellows. But then now what we are seeing, that the democratic parties are completely, the Jatiya Parishad and BNP and Awami League, all of them are out. So when you have Islamist element, okay, then you are bound to see that there will be a kind of reformation or a drastic change in the constitution, right? When they will keep this democracy word, secularism, socialism, and nationalism, they will get rid of, and they'll keep democracy, and there's something new they have come up with, like the human values, this thing, okay, inclusiveness. When the entire country is witnessing that the butchering and murdering of the religious minorities, they're talking of kind of inclusivity. And very interestingly, in the Constitutional Reform Commission, you will not find a kind of anyone from Chittagong tribe. There is no Christian there. There is absolutely no Buddhist there. There is absolutely no Hindu there. So the constitution that is exclusively headed by the Muslims, talking about inclusiveness, human values, human dignity, and talking about democracy is nothing but laughable. Yeah.
It is sort of like something what Fazlur Rahman said in Pakistan a few days ago. I'm digressing a bit, where he said that he was in some religious convention speaking to people, where he said that killing of Muslims is not jihad. He was very specific that killing of Muslims is not jihad, meaning thereby, which I imply that if you kill the infidels, the kafirs, then it is jihad. So that sort of democracy, I believe, that is democracy being practiced.
Yeah, what we are seeing is what Karlekar sir actually wrote 15 years back, is that we are moving towards an extremist kind of, religious Islamist kind of, regime, where, there is absolutely no confusion in the minds of these people that it is an Islamic state. Okay, democracy and all that they'll put only to have a kind of recognition internationally. But then, killing the non-Muslims is jihad is something that they're very, very clear of. Okay. So I see there is an extension of Pakistan, there's an extension of Afghanistan, and that entire belt, if you see, that is moving rapidly towards Islamization of the politics.
Anshuman, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of US National Intelligence, she's been the most outspoken critic of this regime, this Islamization of Pakistan. And I think it's very relevant quoting her out here to get a perspective of the whole situation. And it's quote unquote, the long time unfortunate persecution, killing, abuse of religious minorities like Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and others has been a major area of concern for the US government and President Trump and his administration. She now goes on to say that while talks are just beginning between the US government and the US Trump administration, but she again says, and I quote, but this continues, this meaning the persecution, to remain a central focus area of concern. She goes on to add, quote, the threat of Islamist terrorists and the global effort of different terror groups are rooted in the same ideology and objective, which is to rule or govern with an Islamist caliphate. Now, finally, she ends, I quote her again, this obviously affects people of any other religion other than the ones they find acceptable, and they chose to carry this out with terror and very violent ways and means, unquote. Now, this has been somehow being tampered by the US state administration, which has been a bit ambiguous about her statement. But it is very evidently radical terrorism as we see it. But as an expert, what is your assessment of Tulsi Gabbard's statement? What is going on?
Mayankji, like I appreciate such a strong criticism and very well deserved kind of, and this was expected, and this is always desired that the we should not be politically correct in actually criticizing certain kind of radical elements and extremist activities. While I appreciate such a kind of criticism, strong criticism, as you said, coming from Tulsi Gabbard, I have my concerns, like whether these are all lip services, because as you we rightly said that this has been kind of edited or tampered bit by the US administration. But then the similar kind of concerns is also coming from the European countries. Say, the Italian Prime Minister Meloni's kind of a statement a couple of days back that there is a rapid Islamization going on in the Europe and they are kind of distant from the European values. Okay, that is there. But what worries me right now, why did the US, okay, it's not about the Trump administration, but there is a lot of expectation. I personally expect that they act upon what they say and they bring the US government to kind of, to make, to be answerable and accountable for the things that has gone wrong in Bangladesh and in fact, going on. But at the same time, US has played a very dirty role. What is Bangladesh today? A lot is being attributed and can be very safely attributed to the deep states in America. I just finished writing some stuff, some article. I found that starting from 2020, the American kind of think tanks and research organizations, they single-handedly, with one solid objective, they kept on writing how the Sheikh Hasina government was kind of, anti-democratic, democracy was backsliding and all that. But now the same organizations are completely silent. When you have an intellectual academic cover fire to a particular regime and the scholars are dedicatedly, and look, Professor Ali Riaz, where does he work? He works in University of Illinois. Okay, in US. Okay, so there is a kind of, pardon my language, but the guild of kind of, intellectuals who sort of, try to legitimize. And the America's role in creating and manufacturing kind of terrorist groups in South Asia is not unknown to anyone. And Trump's administration after 4 years, or the biggest role or the bigger kind of an objective of America in Indo-Pacific, South Asia, whatever you say in this region, is to ring fence kind of China, right? If tomorrow any radical regime that comes to power in Bangladesh and it actually toes the American line, will still America speak the same kind of criticism that Tulsi Gabbard is making? So I will hold my thoughts. Okay, I'll pass my remarks very carefully on this particular thing, because I have seen enough of the American roles in making and unmaking of the regimes in the South Asia, and the way they have created the terrorist groups and the Islamic kind of, they have legitimized and given a lot of support to these Islamist forces, starting from Afghanistan to Pakistan to Bangladesh. I'm very, very careful when I speak about the US role. Okay, they are not to be trusted. Okay, that is what I can say. Yeah.
So let us shift our focus to the Bangladeshi army, which was supposed to be, once upon a time, supposed to be sort of a pillar of the state, which upheld the rules of secularism and somehow managed, because in the Islamist countries, the army is the only thing. We have seen that in Turkey. Now things are changing in Egypt, where these people are the ones who uphold the whatever secularism these people have and keep the radicals in place. But the news which is coming out of Bangladesh is that the chief Waqar-uz-Zaman, the army chief, who was there when Sheikh Hasina was deposed, now he has put Lieutenant General Faizur Rahman, the quartermaster general, and he's a known Jamaat sympathizer, he's being put under surveillance for he's holding talks with the ISI and people and Jamaat basically. So do you see this as a radicalization of the Bangladeshi army in itself? Because a quartermaster general, lieutenant general is a very senior position. Now, if he's in direct contact with Jamaat and the radical elements, is the Bangladeshi army also heading towards radicalization?
Mahenkji, this is very interesting. Contrary to the surprise element that you are bringing in your question, let me tell you that Bangladesh army, if not completely, has been substantially radicalized. Okay, the days or the years when Jamaat-e-Islami was banned in Bangladesh, okay,
mm,
what the political regime forgot or overlooked
mm,
was a slow and steady kind of, spreading its tentacles, the Jamaat-e-Islami, the way it was actually capturing its social base. And
mm,
after capturing the social base, it actually focused its kind of, role or activities in uh, uh, joining their own people or motivating, actually encouraging their own people to join the government offices and the state jobs, the government jobs, and in the security forces. Not only the Bangladesh army, but the Bangladesh entire security forces have been kind of, substantially radicalized. And the Jamaat-e-Islami has JI has its own people in all the kind of, security services.
mm,
Go back to 2009, the Pilkhana mutiny, okay, is a classic example. This was a plot to get rid of Sheikh Hasina. And the way the Bangladesh border guard, BGB, okay, no, the BDR, that time it was
media.
BDR, Bangladesh Rifles, okay, where they had a plot, and how many people they killed. And this
Mm,
was a clear sign of the radicalized elements in the Bangladeshi security forces. Sheikh Hasina had tried, in her 15 years of kind of, service in the power, she had tried, but she has not been successful because this goes back to the role and the presence of Jamaat-e-Islami with the help of Hizbut Tahrir in the educational institutions in Bangladesh. All the educational institutions in Bangladesh, like in Indonesia, in Malaysia, okay, you will see that the Hizbut Tahrir is present, the Islamic Chhatra Shibir is present, and
mm,
they sort of, radicalize and legitimize Islamism, Islamist thoughts. And that is where people get recruited to the government services. When your base, your kind of, indoctrination is there in a way of Islamic, radical Islamic thoughts,
mm,
okay, one should not be surprised. And now what we are seeing, that the people who are kind of, Islamist, but not, because that is something very interesting. We'll also have to remember that the radical elements are corrupt elements.
mm,
Okay, more the radical, more corrupt they are. Okay,
mm,
that is one important thing. And the radicalism always has factions. Okay, that is why you will see that the multiple terrorist groups actually operating in the states, different
mm,
states. So that is why you will see that people who are Islamist but against Jamaati.
mm,
Okay, Jamaat is not the only thing. Okay, there are
mm,
other groups who are
mm,
also trying to have a
mm,
piece of, okay, while this is going on. So they are the ones who are fearful, apprehensive of the thing that Jamaat is taking the lion's share of the so-called revolution of
mm,
2024. So now what is happening in Bangladesh army is that some people are in, it has also a history of kind of, security forces actually staging coup and taking over power. Okay, and this is something not new in Bangladesh.
mm,
So this Faizur Rahman, the report said that he was attempting to stage a coup. That was one allegation against him, and he was. There is also one theory, one we can also think of, that whether Faizur Rahman was going against the lines of Jamaat Islami. Did he become kind of an ambitious? Okay,
mm, mm,
because Jamaat-e-Islami, and because at this point of time, to put someone on surveillance, under surveillance,
mm,
and that by the army guy, okay, to also we need to take it with a pinch of salt, try to understand whether this fellow was going against the Jamaat line. Okay, independently, he was in talk with the Bangla, like Pakistani diplomats. What the report says. To that extent, it is at this point of time, I'm not surprised with the radical elements in the security forces because I have tracked it very, very well for last 10, 15 years. I know that it is substantially radicalized and the radical elements there in security forces. But this tussle between the army chief and the one Faizur Rahman is one has to take with pinch of salt and try to understand whether this guy is over ambitious. Okay, he's trying to capture power to stage a coup or something of that sort. Yeah.
This brings us to the final section, which is perhaps which concerns all of us Indians, and we should be on the lookout for it because General Upendra Dwivedi, the chief of the army staff, has already raised concerns about the presence of ISI in the region surrounding area, particularly the Chicken Snack area. And it is the Pakistani army, it's already started. There's some training exercises going on, it's training the Bangladeshi army. So reports are there that the ISI is trying to re-establish its presence in Bangladesh. Now, this has serious concerns for India. Are we in for a second hostile border, or let us say a third hostile border? Because we should not forget China itself. For the third hostile border, should we prepare for it?
And we are absolutely right. We should all and we must be prepared. Only thing is that to say that now this border has become hostile, it is not correct. This border has always been hostile. Okay, to think that Bangladesh kind of the kind of a threat perception or the threat issues that we have along the India-Bangladesh border is something that we the people who follow it are very careful. We have done some kind of studies, and previously we have found out that the security is not only in terms of a direct threat to the territorial sovereignty of India or to its territorial integrity, but the security are multifaceted, in terms of cattle smuggling to all
Mm.
sorts of smuggling goods to kind of, fentanyl. There is a lot. And the people, the biggest threat that comes from this area is the human trafficking and people
Mm.
actually switching over to our side. There are crores of Bangladeshis are living illegally in our country,
Mm.
right? But then this is now something that the but somehow officially the ISI elements were not present in Bangladesh under the Sheikh Hasina regime. You are
Mm.
absolutely right. But now there is the pro-Pakistan elements are in the helm of affair, like the Jamaat-e-Islami. Okay, there is a new kind of lost love kind of thing is found. Okay, they are kind of trying to, the brotherhood is coming together.
Mm.
And the Pakistanis are also, ISI was actually itching towards this kind of, a scenario where they can easily get in. So not only the chicken snake area, but the entire India-Bangladesh border is going to
Mm.
be a hostile kind of, area for us for a long time now. Okay, and given this kind of, situation where the political parties, the democratic oriented parties are on a run. Okay, I don't see in the next 5-7 years time, okay, the Islamist forces can be defeated, or a counter movement will generate in Bangladesh where they will delegitimize these Islamist forces. But I'm hopeful because given the 1990 kind of a struggle where the women and the other civil society members came, and that is how Sheikh Hasina came back to power. Okay, I'm little hopeful that the Bangladeshi civil societies will be little more kind of vocal. They will assert their kind of position. But if I keep that as a kind of hope, but practically, if I look at this situation, that India-Bangladesh border is going to be a hostile border for us for a long time now.
Mm. Things look very gloomy, Anshumanji, because he's already gone to Muhammad Yunus, has already gone to China, and he's offering the waterways, calling itself the guardian of the seas now. So
Yeah.
things don't look very bright, shall we say?
Yeah, it doesn't look bright, but at the same time, we must also keep in mind we should be careful about these things. We are not anymore the same country of 1962.
Mm.
We
Mm.
are a very powerful country. We are the biggest market, and we have a thriving democracy. The world looks up to us. Okay, there are many countries, even the European guys are looking up to us, like how, despite our diversities, despite our kind of poverty or whatever, we have actually kept democracy in its highest order,
Mm.
okay, institutionally and otherwise. It
Mm.
will not be easy for the elements like, Yunus or any Bangladeshi or any ISI. It will not be easy for them. But at the same time, okay, if they cannot defeat, they can certainly irritate us. Okay,
Mm.
and they will remain as an irritant. Okay, and they have always been an irritant to us for a long time now, and we
Mm.
have to very careful. It looks gloomy, but at the same time, we have to be very careful. Yeah.
Very true words, Anshumanji. We need to be careful. And on that note, I would like to conclude with the hope, because these discussions are much needed. Places like Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, we don't give them ample attention till they blow up in our face. So it is very important. And thank you for sparing time for us. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you, Mayankji. Thanks for the opportunity. It was a wonderful discussing with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.